want to jump right into this. The situation in Aleppo, I'd say goes from bad to worse. I think it's going from worse to worser, if that's even a thing. And joining us right now, someone who is intimately aware of it, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. He's the founder and president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. Dr. Jasser, I say good morning to you, but I know I say that hesitantly because Syria, the Syria that you know, Aleppo, the people and the city that you are aware of is in the kind of dire straits that we just don't see in this world anymore.
We really don't. Thanks for covering this because I can tell you American Syrians are just beyond despondent that this could be happening in the 21st century. For so long, our families that escaped the Middle East, my family escaped Aleppo in the late 60s, escaping this same regime. And we thought we'd never see a time in which the Syrians woke up to take back control of their country. They did in 2011. For a few years, there was hope that the revolution would, while it was militant, but was fighting against the regime, that the world would do something to help them, not with soldiers, but simply with the means. But it didn't. And as I testified to Congress a few times, that if we didn't, there was no political solution, that it would devolve into the worst humanitarian crisis in history. Why? Because this regime is the most ruthless in the planet that we've seen since World War II. They are the North Korea of the Middle East. They are assassinating, executing people in the streets. What we're seeing in Aleppo was what was seen in other cities at the beginning of the revolution, and now they have a green light because they know we're in a transition period here in America. And while the Obama administration again lectured them from the UN, talking to them about trying to shame them into stopping this, we're seeing, and by the way, if you think this is a civil war, right now what's happening in Aleppo is being driven by Iranian troops and also by Russians who know what's happening and are basically knowing that they can get away with anything because they have the veto power in the UN. I have family in South Aleppo, cousins, aunts, and uncles, and they're living day to day. They at times have water cut off, unable to get food. We have no way to get them out, and we really don't know what to do.
We're talking right now to the founder and president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. He's joining us on the KTAR Newsmaker line, and we're talking about Aleppo. And Dr. Jasser, this is a very complex issue. There are a lot of players involved. It's not just as simple as the regime versus the rebels. A lot of different players, like you just talked about, Iran and Iraq and things along those lines. And I think that nowadays we as Americans have become, very isolated in our own little bubbles. And if it doesn't impact us, then we really don't pay much attention to it. And this has been going on for 5 years. Talk to our audience right now about why they should care and they should learn more about what's happening, specifically in Aleppo, but bigger in Syria.
Well, I think as an American, what happens in the world when American values, when values of freedom are not addressed, that vacuum gets filled by evil, and eventually we will have to do something about it. So aside from the humanitarian crisis of rapes and children being killed and all these other things that pull at our heartstrings, but yet we seem to not think it's an American interest to do much about it. Eventually, that vacuum that is on Israel's border, our greatest ally in the Middle East, that vacuum in which Russia is feeling that they can do what they want into the region as they now are selling arms to Iran and working with them hand in hand. We've lost Iraq. The militias now demolishing Aleppo are Iraqi Shiite militias that came around ISIS in northern Iraq into Aleppo to fight. So that region is expanding towards our allies, be it Egypt, Jordan, and other Arab allies that are working with us. And eventually we will have to do something about it in order to contain the region. So it is in our military interest. It is in our strategic and humanitarian interests. And at the end of the day, I hope Americans that are listening will understand that the balance between America's interests versus our values, I think they're the same thing. I think that if the UN really stands for protecting the world from evil, the Assad regime is evil incarnate. children are being killed. 20% of those killed in Aleppo have been children. Hospitals are being built underground because if they're built overground, the government blows them up or takes them over and kills the patients because they want the community to know that if they work with the rebels, they will not live another day to talk about it. And that's really what we need to understand as we look at a strategy going forward is that eventually we'll have to, and we don't need to send troops in there. What we need to do is start helping the other side and putting Russia on notice that we're going to create safe zones. We did it in Bosnia, Herzegovina in the 90s. We had UN protection forces that were able to have safe zones in the region, and we can do it again if we only had the will.
We're talking to Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. He is the founder and president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy and of Syrian descent himself. And Dr. Jasser, we talk a little, and you mentioned Russia in there, which is coincidental maybe in that Russia and Vladimir Putin have been in the news for the last couple of weeks surrounding what they did or didn't do with the election here. I mean, to me, I was never unclear about it, sir, but in understanding the role that Russia is playing right now in the slaughter of civilians, of innocents, of women and children, is there any question that Russia's not our friend?
There isn't. And this calculus that somehow if we share common enemies, that the enemy of our enemy is our friend, this calculus that kleptocrats, and that's really what Russia is, they're a kleptocracy that will do anything to gather cash, oil, substance to keep Putin, who is not, the Soviet Union doesn't exist, but he's still mentally a Soviet. And they are anti-Western. They're propaganda machines, as they have hacked our newspapers and hacked our government, is about spreading the ideology of socialism, spreading tyranny across the planet. They work with Iran closely because they are anti-Western. They view any allies we have in the world as their enemies. So this concept that somehow we can work with carrots rather than sticks when dealing with Russia is just belies 100 years of understanding what motivates Russians to act. They see us as weak, and as Reagan said, peace through strength when you deal with the Russians or the Soviets at the time. And somehow to say that we can work with kleptocrats like Putin and somehow work with carrots with them makes no sense. The reason they're feeding their friend Assad, they want that base of Tartus on the Mediterranean, and they're doing anything possible to maintain that base.
Dr. Jasser, thank you very much. Please, we also send our well wishes and our thoughts and our prayers to your family and your friends that are still back in Syria.